Hi, this is Kathy Fox Alfano, and you're watching Upper Cape Spotlight, Conversations with Kathy. Today my guest is Senator Sue Moran from the Plymouth Barnstable District. Sue and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and she's been doing some fabulous things for us up at the State House, so we want to let you know just what she's doing. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is what's on everybody's mind. Okay, there's several things, but the first one is the bridges.
Oh, yes.
The bridges. I mean, people have had to spend an hour going for what's usually a 10-minute ride, and it's just monkeying up everything. We're pretty close to being done this time, but we are very afraid here that if they only do the Sagamore, they're going to have to close the Bourne for months to get it fixed. Is any of that true?
So this is a big deal. You are at ground central for all of the traffic concerns, public safety concerns. So my office, and I've been extremely active. The good news is within the next couple of days, yes, the Bourne fix will be over.
Good.
But what I decided to do is call in the DOT, Army Corps, State Police, Bourne, all of the, from the town manager to select board members to the chief of police, and have weekly or bi-weekly meetings when it was the Sagamore was getting fixed and now Bourne getting fixed, because I wanted to be able to lift the concerns of the community right to the people that were doing the work. And the way it happened was I was sitting on Adams Street I had a meeting at 1 o'clock in Plymouth. It's a 35-minute ride usually for me. I left 2 hours and I was sitting for more than an hour without moving on Adams Street. And a fisticuffs practically broke out right at the school, which is at that same area.
Wow.
People were out of their cars. It was, let's just call it a circus. And I picked up my phone that minute. I called my chief of staff and I said, I want everybody in within 2 days. This can't go on. It looks like we don't know what we're doing because we're not listening to the community. First thing that happened was Adams Street was sort of taken out of the equation, and really there were efforts made so that the neighbors' priorities were number one. Other things that happened, the chief of police called and said, I can't get anyone at the state, and there have been about 8 accidents on the rotary with lights that the DOT decided were a good idea, but they're not working. That got fixed right away. And I said, from now on, I want a person from DOT and a person from Army Corps in charge to take my chief's call, and so we really streamlined a lot of the communication. As far as the big fixes go moving forward, the state administration, Governor Healy, has decided to really put more specifics and more money into the application, but to do one at a time. And I am fighting with all I can possibly use to demand that this is going to be 2 bridges replaced. So right now it's literally called a 2-bridge project. And so the first application went in with the Sagamore. A lot more state money went in to give us sort of more points in the entire country to sort of win the approval for the Sagamore. There's only every 2 years that those applications can be made. So we're very optimistic about the Sagamore, and we're fighting crazy for the Bourne. And I'm going to keep up my meetings so that when we look at planning, we want to be sure that my dad was in a wheelchair my whole life. I want to be sure there are mobility issues that are considered. We want to be sure that the bike lanes make sense because there's quite an elevation change.
Yes.
So we want to be sure that it's traversable in a common sense way. And I was thrilled to hear that one of the chief architects is actually living in Bourne.
Wow.
So he's got job security as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Now, I had heard that the original study for the design of the bridges was done pre-pandemic. Well, we all know the bridges now carry so many more people because this is another thing that people can't afford to live on the Cape. So people who work are living in Wareham or Carver or Middleborough and commuting over the bridge. There's perhaps 50% more people now coming over the bridges or going back and forth at rush hour, which makes it a nightmare. So the bridge design that we were looking at, is that really enough? Does it need to change because we have so many more people coming over the bridge?
So another great question. There are a couple things at play there. First of all, I pointed out to the state that we're using older numbers, and it turns out it's actually more than a third more in terms of the traffic. But at the same time, remember, the state is coming down with more and more climate sensitive regulations, which will get us out of cars. So that's going to fluctuate. We're looking at putting a ton of more money into housing. In fact, the governor just proposed a huge package so that we should be able to build more housing and accommodate more people through housing improvements. So these are all going to change. Sure. I anticipate that the capacity design is going to stay about the same, but we're watching it. And also, remember, there are a lot of people that are concerned about Cape Cod having too wide an open doorway. And
I understand that.
We certainly are a tourism economy, but a lot of constituents contact me and say, let's make sure it's safe, let's make sure it's very accessible, it's good in an emergency, but we want to be sure that we keep the best of Cape Cod the way it is, continue to protect our resources for our community members.
One thing that concerned me was they were looking at both bridges, but they weren't looking at what's between them. And let's face it, half the people who come over the Bourne Bridge are going to Route 6. Mm-hmm. So they're still going down our one-lane sandwich road where we have school and we have Market Basket and all this stuff. That, when I talked to the people in the DOT, I said, this is a whole project. And they know. They said, oh no, it's only the bridges and the access points. I'm like, no, you have to look at the whole thing. And I don't know if they could expand Sandwich Road or if there's a better way to do it. I have some ideas, but I'm not sure that they'll work. But maybe they will, because the base seems to be much more in play than it was even a year ago.
Well, the base has reached out about potential housing projects, which is a great thing. Yes. But as to the bridges, one final point. For the meetings that I've been conducting every several weeks, I've been able to say, what are you doing in preparation? And so DOT has said, we are doing advanced planning, and that's been the first time we've heard that. Okay. In addition, I said, how about for District 5, how about we not do state road programs at the same time we're doing the bridges so that people have nowhere to get away from the traffic? How about coordinating that and having that conversation? Again, that was an idea that people hadn't really been in the same room to talk about. So the meetings that I've been having with all of the parties involved have really started to bring this coordination that you point out to light.
Well, that would be great. So Sue, one of the big concerns we have here is housing. As you know, people are having to come from Wareham or Carver or Middleborough over the bridge to work here on the Cape. And I understand that people don't want the Cape to change, but when you can't get your medications because CVS is shorthanded and won't even answer the phone, there's a problem, and that's only the start. And we're probably better off here in the Upper Cape than the Lower Cape or the Outer Cape, because at least people can commute. So I understand that we have approximately 600 acres potentially available at the base. When are we going to start talking about that in real terms?
Well, it's coming up, but there are a lot of conversations that are happening. The governor and Secretary Augustus, who's the housing secretary, were recently in the middle of the Cape. I've got them coming to the Upper Cape very soon. The secretary is going to actually tour several different housing projects so that he can see firsthand why the blanket rules don't always work for the Cape. And, the sort of ideas that these builders have come up with are really more suited. For 2 years, I did housing conversations on both sides of my district, on the Plymouth side as well as on the Cape side, to talk not only with municipalities as to what they think they're needed with housing people, what they're doing, but also with builders. Builders know what the expenses are in terms of the exorbitant post-COVID prices and what's needed now. And so the new housing proposal the governor just came out with has some of those ideas included, and we're going to push for that. But, you know, as you point out, we have a shortage of land. And the idea that the base, which has a great deal of land, has floated the idea that I think APCC, Andrew Gottlieb, came out with earlier, and that they're open to a housing discussion makes all the sanity in the world. It's a smart idea. I want to be sure we're sensitive to the traffic right at those bridges, so we look at both sides of the base. But I also want to be sure that it works for everyone. We still have a conversation going on with the machine gun range expansion that the base is interested in, which I read, I believe, in the Cape Cod Times the last day or two, is hugely over budget.
Yes.
And do we really need to be spending money on that kind of project when Fort Devens is already an expanded machine gun range proposal? And do we really need that high traffic area to be the place? And also, when you look at our single aquifer and the pollution that we've been fighting from the base for years and years, it's a little one step forward, two steps back in my thinking. So I'm very interested in having a conversation about housing moving forward on the base. I think that's a terrific use of that land. I think we can look at some innovative proposals in terms of design, and we've got great possibility in terms of transportation right there. So that's one thing and the town is already on it. Bourne has been great about looking at that creatively.
Right. What I'd love to see is just a state or a park over the sole source aquifer, right? Wouldn't that work? And then
be protective too.
Right. We all know we need workforce housing, but we also need veteran housing, and we need senior housing.
Yep.
We need emergency housing. So I'd love to see like little villages, and they can be mixed, But I think that would be a great idea. And yes, access doesn't have to be all from Bourne. It can be from, Falmouth and Mashpee and Sandwich as well.
And you look at the location, if we're, as we talk about the base, it's waterfront. I think there could be a terrific mixed housing possibility there.
Right.
And, we need housing. Our veterans need housing. We've got projects that Senator Sear and I have been funding for veterans housing moving forward. We also have the governor today has put some strict guidelines on immigrant housing in terms of where folks are going to be centralized to be able to apply for jobs. If the federal government it has been the case with Venezuelan immigrants, demanding from the federal government more job opportunities for folks that are here, demanding more from the federal government in terms of handling the huge influx of people.
Yes.
When originally Massachusetts became a safe haven, it was not the situation that we have today.
Correct.
That legislation needs to be looked at so that it makes sense. I mean, I think as a humanitarian thought, when you want to be sure that women and children in particular, there are women who are having babies and need safe circumstances, not only to live, but good medical care. Right. So we, at this point, have to be able to balance the practicality of it and what our resources are. I mean, it's sort of like your family budget. Yes, I want to be sure I can put food on the table, pay my rent, pay my utilities, but I only have a limited amount of money. So we've got to look at it in the context of how much money we're spending and what else we need to be spending money on, like housing, like medical care, like veterans benefits, all of the things that we need.
Right. I agree. One of the other things that I'm very concerned about is climate resiliency. We know it's coming. We are in a very vulnerable spot. What is there anything being done in a practical sense, not just talking, but doing? Because one of these days we're going to get slammed.
You're absolutely right. So the good news is there's strong recognition that climate change is something we need to work on. We need to be sure our housing is, is green. We want to be sure that we're using renewable products. When we look at the timing, the utilities advocates, people who run the utilities, say, look, we've got to, it's going to be too expensive. We're going to have to put that cost on the residents and businesses. So we have to work with not only bring the state in, DPU, all of the utility management companies just need to have support in the conversation. We're doing this, we're moving forward, it's happening. We've got to move away from fossil fuels, and it's not going to be cheap or smooth or quick, but we do have to put, the Attorney General even has put guidelines, the governor has put guidelines in, as has the Senate. So it's really locally a matter of pushing your elected officials and being sure that we're practical with the way that we're building, the way that we're looking at transportation. We're starting to put funding into RTA, electric buses. The administrator of, Tom Kerr of CCRTA is doing a terrific job at that. But we've got to be comprehensive about it, and we can't just say no. We have to have the conversation that gets to yes.
Well, Sue knows one of my pet peeves is I'd like to see EV chargers at libraries all across the state, but especially here, because where better to charge your car and read a book or read the newspaper or whatever. So that's something I would love to see, like I said, in all of the libraries.
And it's your initiative that has been moving that forward in Moran.
Yes, but it takes time, as always. But yeah, it will get there. It just takes a bit of time.
Well, and it's also accessibility.
Yes.
Because, people will be more confident to buy an electric car if they know that there's a charging station. Absolutely.
It's true. I have a plug-in hybrid now, so I'm sort of halfway there. But because I don't feel like there's enough chargers around yet, but they're coming. So I can't wait to have that. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is Holtec. Mm-hmm. We're thinking it's done. They'll never do anything, but not yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Holtec has been denied a permit from the state. Period. That's done, and that was through the success of incredible advocacy,
yes.
Not only from my office and from the delegation on both sides of the bridge, but from advocates. And the company now is focused on federal policies and permits. And I will tell you, I just, at the meeting that was recently held about the Bourne and Sagamore Bridge replacements, where Senator Markey was there, Senator Warren, and Congressman Keating was in session, but he zoomed in. We all talked about the fact that that is something we are all on the same page about putting a hard stop to. So and it's happening in places where there are other nuclear decommissioning efforts all over the country. And in Japan, it's moving forward. But in the United States, there are pockets of advocates that are saying, not one drop of radioactive material in my water. And I feel strongly about that for Cape Cod Bay.
I agree, because those of us who live on this side, it doesn't take very long for that water to come right down the canal and into Buzzards Bay. And nobody wants that. Who wants to eat those, the scallops or the fish or whatever? It's just, or your children swimming. I'm the chair of the Wastewater Advisory Committee, which, believe me, are words I never thought I would say. But I have learned so much, and we have an awful lot going on. We have all sorts of new products coming up. Why don't you tell us about some of those?
Well, it's also a subject near and dear to my heart. Way back before I was a senator, I was on the Water Quality Coalition for Cape Cod. And when the 208 plan was discussed, before it was even approved at the State House, I was, sort of boot high in that whole topic. Interestingly, all over the Cape, I'm really seeing a lot of creativity and open-mindedness. The Earl,
Yes, Hilda and
Hilda
Earl.
and Earl,
Yes.
their peace cycling projects are really all over the place. I mean, you see information in the newspapers. We've been working at the State House with them in terms of looking at funding opportunities and study efforts. And the efforts in Falmouth, because of their project, have been really catching all over the Cape. So I think there's a real, first of all, there's a high amount of knowledge that people have because they've been paying attention, but also a concern about spending money unnecessarily.
Yes, yes.
And I think the ick factor is kind of below the money factor. So I think that's a good thing for the future.
Just as an example, if we had sewering, it could be up to $100,000 per home. If you have a new IA system that goes in to your existing system, that could be 18, 20, 25,000. A urine diverting system, which I know takes some getting used to, but not a lot, is about $1,000. Figure it out. I mean, maybe, 100-something years ago, people changed. They got used to going in the house. We may have to do a little changing as well. And the inconvenience is really small. So I think that is something, I know they're looking at it in Falmouth. I think, it would be great if Bourne could be, tack on to that project and, do some, just a few houses and see how it works. Or commercial buildings, or schools or whatever, there's a lot. And I am very concerned about sewering in that, where does the wastewater go? Because we know at one point Wareham was threatening to outfall it into the canal. Again, who wants that? We don't. So we have to come up with and there's so many new ways.
There are, and it's going to be, you're going to need to piece things together.
Yes.
But there's no reason just to make blanket approvals where it's one thought. We now have so many, and technology is moving ahead
all the time.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. It'll be really interesting.
Never thought I'd say that, but I agree.
Neither did I. Never. But all these things count for our environment and for the future. So we have to look at it. So anything else you want to tell us, Sue?
Just that, I'll tell you, there's a new administration, and even though there are challenges with transportation, with housing, there really are incredibly not only smart, but people that really have their heart in working across the aisle to be sure that things get done. I think Massachusetts is in a very good place in that regard.
Right. Yes, they're definitely actually doing something, which is so great. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Sue. We look forward to what you're doing in the future, and we can't wait to work with you.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.